Leland Marsh had 11 days left before the bank could legally begin foreclosure proceedings on the house his father had built, and he had $340 in his account, a broken snowblower he couldn't sell, and a 12-year-old son who still believed everything was going to be fine. The boy's name was Noah. He was the kind of kid who made his own lunch without being asked and left the porch light on when Leland worked late. Noah had his mother's eyes and his grandfather's habit of fixing things with whatever was nearby. Tape, a bent nail, whatever the moment offered. He did not know about the letters from the bank. Leland had been putting them in the kitchen drawer under the takeout menus, face down in the order they arrived. It was the third week of November, the kind of cold that settles into southwestern Ontario like it owns the place. Not dramatic, not storming, just permanent. The temperature had been below -10 for 6 days. The furnace in the old house on Driftwood Road was running on prayer, and a filter Leland hadn't changed in 14 months. He worked the early shift at the Huron County Road Authority, salting and plowing from 4 a.m. until the roads were passable. He had worked that shift for 9 years. When Sandra left, Noah was 7. The marriage was not terrible, it was simply finished. Leland had kept the house because the alternative was an apartment in town and a son who shuttled between 2 addresses like luggage. He had not wanted that for Noah. He had not wanted that for himself. So he kept the house and the mortgage and the property taxes and the furnace that rattled every time the temperature dropped below -15, and he told himself every spring that next year would be different. Next year had come and gone 3 times. The thing that broke the budget was not dramatic. It was a cracked wheel bearing on the truck in August, $1,500, and then Noah's dental work in September that the insurance only covered halfway. And then the furnace part in October that the technician said was a temporary fix at best. The math stopped working. It had been not working for a while, and then all at once it stopped completely, the way ice gives way, not gradually, all at once. Leland did not tell anyone. Not his sister in Goderich, not his friend Dave, who he had coffee with most Saturdays, not Noah, especially not Noah. He paid what he could, deferred what he couldn't, and kept showing up to the 4 a.m. shift because showing up was the one thing in his life he could still control entirely. The woman appeared on a Tuesday evening in the 3rd week of November. Leland had finished his shift at noon, done 2 loads of laundry, picked up Noah from school at 3:30, and was sitting in the truck in the driveway at 5:15 trying to decide whether to go inside or drive somewhere he had no reason to go. He did that sometimes. Sat in the truck after the day was done and before the evening started, in the 10 minutes that belonged to neither. He saw her walking along the shoulder of Driftwood Road. She was moving slowly. Not injured slowly, old slowly, the careful, deliberate pace of someone whose body required negotiation before each step. She was wearing a coat that was not warm enough for November and carrying a plastic bag in each hand. No hat, mittens that did not match. She was walking east, away from town, which meant she was walking away from everything. The grocery store, the gas station, the church hall where the food bank ran on Wednesday afternoons. Leland watched her pass the end of the driveway. He looked at the front door of the house. Noah was inside making something in the kitchen. He could see the light from the window, the small movement of his son doing something useful and ordinary. He looked at the woman. She was 20 feet past the driveway now. 30. He got out of the truck. He said, "Excuse me." She stopped but didn't turn right away, like she wasn't certain the voice was meant for her. He said, "It's getting dark. Can I drive you somewhere?" She turned. She was older than he had thought from the truck. 70, maybe more. Her face had the particular weathered quality of someone who had spent decades doing outdoor work. Not rough, just honest. She looked at him the way people look at unexpected offers, when they have learned that unexpected things are usually costs disguised as gifts. She said, "I'm going to Mabel Curry's place on the 5th line. It's not far." Leland knew Mabel Curry's place. It was 4 kilometers east on a road that had no shoulder and no streetlights. In November, after dark, 4 kilometers on a road like that was a different kind of far than it looked on a map. He said. "I'll drive you," she said. "I don't want to be any trouble." He said. "It's dark and it's cold. Get in." She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up her bags and walked to the passenger side. Her name was Agnes Kowalczyk. She said it carefully, as if accustomed to people fumbling it. She was 73. She had lived in Huron County for 41 years, having come from Krakow originally, then Mississauga, then the farm on the 5th line which she and her husband, Tadeusz, had bought in 1987 for reasons everyone around them thought were impractical. Tadeusz had died 4 years ago. She was still on the farm. Leland said. "Do you have family nearby?" she said. "My son is in Calgary. He comes at Christmas when he can." She looked out the window at the dark fields. "He tries." They drove the 4 kilometers. He pulled into the lane. The farmhouse was small and dark except for one window on the ground floor. A barn sat behind it, boards warped, roof visibly uneven. He could see from the headlights that the porch railing was gone on one side, just a post with nothing connecting it. He said, "Is there someone who checks on you out here?" She said, "I check on myself." She said it without bitterness, just as fact. She opened the door. She picked up her bags. She said, "Thank you for the drive. You're a good man." She went inside. Leland sat in the lane for a moment with the engine running. He looked at the house. One lit window. A barn with a bad roof. -12 and falling. He thought about turning around and going home to Noah and the kitchen light and the drawer full of letters he wasn't opening. He turned off the engine. He got out. He knocked on the door. She opened it and looked at him. He said, "Your porch light is out. Do you have a bulb?" She did. It was in the 3rd drawer. She checked. He changed the bulb, standing on a step stool she held steady from below, her hands gripping the sides with more strength than he expected. When he came down, she had put the kettle on. He should have said no thank you. He had Noah at home. He had things to do, or things he could have invented to have to do. He sat down at the kitchen table. The kitchen was orderly in the way of someone who had been managing alone long enough to develop a system. Everything had a place. The dish rack was dry. There was a jar of something dark on the counter, preserves, maybe beet, the color of garnets, and next to it a small wooden box with a clasp, the kind that might hold recipe cards or photographs, pushed to the back near the wall. She made tea. She did not ask how he took it. She set a cup in front of him and a small pitcher of cream and said nothing, and that was fine. He called Noah from the table and told him there was food in the fridge and to do his homework, and he would be home by 7:30. Noah said, "Okay." He said, "Lock a front door." Noah said it already was. Leland stayed until 8. They talked about the barn roof. She said she knew it needed work. She said the quote she had gotten in the spring was $6,200, and she was working on it. She said this in the same tone she used for everything. Level, neither resigned nor alarmed, the tone of a person who has made peace with the distance between the way things are and the way they should be. He drove home in the dark. Noah was in bed. Leland stood in the kitchen and looked at the drawer under the takeout menus and did not open it. He went back the next Saturday. He told himself it was to look at the barn roof. That was not entirely untrue. He brought his ladder and his eyes, and Noah, who sat in the farmyard with a notebook and sketched the barn from 3 different angles, because that was the kind of thing Noah did. The roof needed more than he could do alone. 3 sections of sheeting were lifted at the seams. 2 of the purlins underneath were soft with rot, and the ridge cap had separated at the east end. Not dangerous yet. Getting there, Agnes made lunch. Soup with dark bread that she had made herself, the bread dense and sour in the good way. Noah ate 2 bowls and said it was the best soup he had ever had. Agnes looked at the boy with the expression of a woman who has fed people for 50 years and still finds it gratifying when it lands. She said, "You are very polite." Noah said, "My dad taught me." Leland looked at his soup. He called Dave that evening. Dave had a cousin who did roofing. The cousin came out the following weekend and looked at the barn and gave a number that was less than $6,200, but still more than Agnes had. Leland did not tell Agnes what he did next. He paid the difference himself, $840, from the account that was already below where it should have been. He told Dave the cousin had given a discount because of the time of year. Work was slow in November. Dave did not push on it. Agnes never knew. Leland never told her. The roof was repaired the first weekend of December. Agnes made coffee and watched from the kitchen window. When they finished, she brought out a thermos for the cousin and did not comment on the price. Leland kept coming. Not every day. Tuesdays after his shift, most Saturdays. He split firewood in the lot behind the house. He looked at the furnace. Older than the one at his place, but better maintained. Serviced every fall by a man in Blythe who had been doing it for 20 years. She showed him the receipts. He fixed the porch railing. He found a section of old cedar in the barn that matched the existing wood well enough. Agnes did not make a fuss about any of it. She did not thank him excessively. She acknowledged what he did and moved on, the way competent people acknowledge things, with recognition, not performance. He found that he liked this. He had spent years around people who thanked you in proportion to how guilty they felt about needing help, and the excess of the gratitude was always somehow about them. Agnes simply said it was good work and moved on to the next thing. Noah started coming most Saturdays. He had begun asking on Friday evenings whether they were going to Agnes's farm the next day. In the same tone, he asked about hockey practice or the Saturday morning hardware runs he had always liked. Leland watched his son carry firewood in from the lot and sit at the kitchen table with a cup of hot chocolate Agnes made from scratch and answer Agnes's questions about school with full sentences, not the fragments responses he got at home. One Saturday in December, Noah asked Agnes why the wooden box on the counter was never opened. Agnes looked at the box. She looked at Noah. She said, "It's open sometimes." She said it the way adults answer children's questions when the real answer belongs to a different conversation. Noah said, "What's in it?" Agnes said, "Letters, old ones." Noah said, "From who?" Agnes said, "People who mattered." She picked up her mug. "Drink your chocolate before it gets cold." Leland saw the boy look at the box one more time before he did. That night, driving home, Noah said, "Do you think she's lonely?" "Probably," Noah said. "She doesn't seem sad." Leland said, "She doesn't seem sad. Some people carry it differently." Noah said nothing for a while. Then he said, "We should keep coming." Leland said, "Yeah, we should." The letter from the bank arrived on a Thursday, and this one was different from the others. It was registered mail. Leland had to sign for it at the post office. The woman behind the counter did not make eye contact when she handed it over, which meant she knew what kind of envelope it was, because in a town this size everyone knew which envelopes meant what. He sat in the truck in the post office parking lot and opened it. The bank had moved to the next stage. He had 30 days. He drove to Dave's house. Dave was in the garage. Leland sat on an overturned bucket and told him everything. The cracked bearing, the dental work, the furnace, the math that had stopped working, all the letters in the drawer, all of it. Dave listened the whole way through without interrupting, which was not easy for Dave. When Leland finished, Dave said, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" It wasn't a question. Leland said he didn't know. Dave said that was not an answer. Leland said, "I thought I could fix it." Dave said he would call someone at the credit union Monday. He said there were options Leland hadn't looked at. He said stop putting letters in drawers. Leland drove home. He took the letters out of the drawer and put them on the kitchen table and looked at them. 11 of them. He put them in order by date. Then he called his sister in Goderich and told her. She cried a little and told him to stop being an idiot about asking for help. He said he knew. She said she meant it. He said he knew that too. He did not tell Noah. Not yet. 2 weeks before Christmas, Leland arrived at Agnes's farm on a Tuesday afternoon, and something was different before he opened the door. The porch light was on, good, the one he had fixed, but the kitchen window, which was always lit when he arrived, was dark. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. He opened the door. It was unlocked, as it always was. The kitchen was empty. Cold in the way a room gets cold when the person who keeps it warm has been away from it. The wooden box was on the table, not on the counter where it always sat. It was open. The clasp was undone and the lid was back, and Leland could see the contents from where he stood. A bundle of envelopes tied with kitchen twine, and something else, a photograph face up, next to the box. He did not look at the photograph. He called Agnes's name into the house. He heard her. Not a voice, a sound. From the back of the house, the bedroom hallway. She was on the floor in the hallway outside the bathroom, not unconscious. Sitting with her back against the wall, legs straight, one hand on her hip. She had slipped on the tile inside the bathroom. She showed him the small rug that had folded under her foot and gotten herself out into the hallway before she ran out of momentum. She said, "I was going to call. I was just catching my breath first." He crouched down next to her. He said, "How long have you been here?" She said, "Maybe 40 minutes." He said, "Agnes." She said, "I've had worse." He helped her up slowly. She was lighter than he expected. He had not registered before how small she had become, or perhaps always been, because her presence in a room was larger than her actual size. He walked her to the kitchen and sat her in the chair by the table and turned the kettle on. He checked her hip. She let him, clinically, without embarrassment, and it was not broken. Badly bruised, she would know by morning. She said she knew. He sat across from her. The box was open between them. He did not look at it. Then she picked up the photograph and held it toward him and said, "That's Tadeusz. Before I knew him." He took it. A young man outside a building, thin, dark-haired, squinting into the sun. The photograph was black and white, and the edges were soft with age. She said, "He was 24. That was in Krakow. He didn't know I existed yet." Leland looked at the young man in the photograph. She said, "He became a carpenter. Did I tell you that?" Leland said, "You didn't." She said, 40 years of it. Every house he touched, he said, "You have to understand the bones first. The rest is just surface." She took the photograph back. She held it the way you hold something that has become more precious through loss than it ever could have been through possession. She said, "He would have liked you." She looked at the photograph. He would have trusted a man who fixes things without being asked. Leland went home late that night. Noah was already in bed. Leland sat at the kitchen table with the mortgage letters still stacked there in order and looked at them for a long time. He thought about Tadeusz, who understood bones before surfaces. He thought about Noah asking if they should keep coming, not because anyone told him to, but because it was obvious to an 11-year-old that a person alone on a farm in November needed someone to come. He thought about the 40 minutes Agnes spent on the hallway floor catching her breath before she was willing to call for help, because she had learned at some point that needing things and deserving them were not always the same argument, and she had been losing that argument for a long time. He picked up the phone and called the credit union himself. He did not wait for Dave to do it. Christmas came. Agnes's son flew in from Calgary. His name was Marek, broad-shouldered, quieter than Leland expected, with his mother's same level eyes. He shook Leland's hand for a long time when they met at the farm on Christmas Eve. He said, "She told me about the barn roof." Leland said it was nothing. Marek said, "She told me about the firewood too, and the railing, and the Tuesdays." He said it, looking at Leland steadily, not with sentimentality, with something more like precision. The look of a man taking an accurate measurement of something important. He said, "Thank you for not making her feel like a project." Leland didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. They had Christmas Eve dinner together, all four of them, Agnes's soup again, and a ham Marek had brought from the airport somehow, still cold, in a cooler in his checked luggage, which Agnes said was exactly the kind of thing Tadeusz would have done. They sat at the kitchen table and nobody talked too much, and it was the best evening Leland had had in 2 years. He knew it while it was happening, which was not a thing that usually happened to him. January came. The credit union meeting went better than it had any right to. The restructured terms were not perfect, but they were survivable, which was more than Leland had believed possible in November. He told Noah on a Sunday morning at the kitchen table, not the full story, enough of it. That the house had been in trouble, and it was less in trouble now. Noah listened. He did not say anything for a while. Then he said, "I knew something was wrong." Leland said, "You did?" Noah said, "Dad, You were sitting in the truck for like 10 minutes before you came inside every day." He picked up his cereal spoon. "I figured it was money." Leland looked at his son. He said, "Why didn't you say anything?" Noah said, "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." He said it without reproach. He was 12 years old. February. Leland arrived at the farm on a Tuesday and Merrick's car was in the lane. He had come back from Calgary. He was helping Agnes go through the house, not clearing it, cataloging it, making a record of things before age and time made the record impossible. He had taken 2 weeks off work. Agnes showed Leland the wooden box that evening. She opened it at the kitchen table and went through it without preamble. The letters were from her mother in Krakow, every one of them 40 years of letters ending in 2009 when her mother died at 91. Agnes had responded to every letter, she said. She had the copies she kept in a binder in the bedroom. Her mother had kept Agnes's letters too. Merrick had found them in Krakow when he went to close her grandmother's apartment. 2 sets of letters. A 40-year conversation, complete on both ends. Leland said, "Have you ever read them together? Both sides?" Agnes said she hadn't. Merrick looked at the box. He looked at his mother. He said quietly, "We could." Agnes looked at her son for a moment. Then she put the lid down gently, not closed, just resting. She said, "Not tonight." She said, "Soon." March brought a thaw and then another freeze. On a Thursday afternoon, Leland was salting the county road on the north side of Blythe when dispatch came over the radio, asking for any units near the 5th line. He was the nearest unit. He changed course. Agnes was fine. It was the laneway. Ice had sheeted over it overnight and her car had gone sideways pulling in. Not badly, no damage. But she couldn't get it back up to the road without help, and the tow company was 40 minutes out. Leland's truck had chains. He pulled her car out in 6 minutes. She stood on the shoulder of the road watching. When it was done, she said, "You were just passing." He said, "I was the closest unit." She said, "You're always the closest unit." She said it looking at him with the level, clear expression she used for things she wanted to say exactly once. She said, "I don't know what I did to deserve that." Leland thought about the road he had been driving that November evening when he first saw her on the shoulder of Driftwood Road. He thought about sitting in the truck in the driveway for 10 minutes. He thought about Noah saying, "We should keep coming," as though it were the most obvious thing. He said, "You didn't have to do anything." She looked at him. She said, "I know what you paid for the barn roof." Dave's cousin told Mabel Curry, and Mabel told me in February. Leland said, "Agnes." She said, "Don't." Not harshly, steadily. The way she said everything that mattered. She said, "I need you to let me say this." He stopped. She said, "Tadeusz and I had no daughters. We wanted them. It didn't happen. I didn't grieve it in the way you grieve some things. You make your life with what you have." She looked at the fields, still white, the sky, the flat gray that Huron County carries from November to April like a long exhale. She said, "But there are things a daughter would do. Small things. Coming on a Tuesday because it's Tuesday. Knowing where the spare bulb is kept. Staying for tea when you don't have to." She stopped. She turned and looked at him directly. She said, "You and that boy." Leland didn't say anything. She said, "I changed my will in January. Marek knows." He agreed without me finishing the sentence. She said, "The farm will go to Marek when I'm gone, that's right, and it should be. But there's a policy Tadeusz put in place in 1999. A small thing. He always said it was for whoever needed it when the time came. I never touched it. I didn't know who it was for." She looked at the wet road. "I know now." Leland said, "I can't." She said, "Leland." First time she had used his full name since the night in the truck. "I'm 73 years old and I spent 40 minutes on my hallway floor in December because I didn't want to be a burden on anyone. I have done this my whole life. I am not doing it anymore," she said. "Let me do this." He didn't answer. She waited the way old people wait when they have already made up their mind and they are giving you time to arrive at the same place. He said, "What was the policy?" She said, $52,000. He looked at her. He looked at the road. She said, "It won't feel real until it does. That's all right. It doesn't have to feel real yet." It didn't feel real for several weeks. The paperwork moved at the pace paperwork moves. Leland told no one except his sister, who cried again, and Dave, who did not cry but was quiet for a long time on the phone. He told Noah on a Sunday, again at the kitchen table, because important things in their house happened at the kitchen table. He said a woman they had helped had done something significant for them. He said it was because of Noah as much as anything. Noah said, "Me?" Leland said, "You asked if we should keep coming." Noah said, "That was obvious." He went back to his cereal. Leland looked at his son and thought about all the obvious things he had not done for too long and how an 11-year-old had known them without being told. He drove to the farm in April. The fields were beginning to turn, that specific pale color that means the frost is leaving, and something is about to happen beneath the surface. Agnes was in the kitchen. Marek had gone back to Calgary. The wooden box was on the counter again in its place near the wall. He said, "I keep thinking about something you said, about Tadeusz. Understanding the bones first," she said. "He said it about houses." Leland said, "I think it's about other things too." She looked at him. She said, "Yes, he would say that too if you asked him right." He sat at the table. She put the kettle on. Outside the kitchen window the yard was wet and the barn, repaired, stood straight against the April sky. The roofline was clean. The boards were tight. He thought about the November evening he had watched an old woman walk past the end of his driveway with 2 plastic bags and no hat. He thought about the 10 minutes he spent in the truck first. He thought about all the ways he had almost not gotten out of the truck. He thought about Noah saying, "We should keep coming." He thought about his own kitchen drawer, the letters face down in the order they arrived, the things he had let accumulate in the dark because he had believed that carrying them alone was the same as being strong. He knew now that it wasn't. It was just solitary. Those were different things, and the difference mattered more than he had understood when he was sitting in the truck not moving. Agnes poured the tea. She set the cups on the table. She sat down across from him. She said, "How is Noah?" He said, "Good, he wants to come Saturday." She said, "Good, I have bread in the freezer. He can take some home." They drank their tea. Outside the window, a crow landed on the fence post at the edge of the yard and sat there doing nothing useful, only existing with complete authority in the particular April light. The barn roof held. The tea was hot. The kettle ticked as it cooled on the burner. In Canada, more than 235,000 people experience homelessness in a given year. Of that number, a growing proportion are adults over 60, people who worked full careers, raised children, paid into systems that were supposed to hold them. The fastest growing segment of people seeking emergency shelter in this country are seniors. Many of them are women living alone in rural areas where the nearest neighbor is 3 kilometers away and the winter is 7 months long. They are not invisible because they are forgotten. They are invisible because the towns they live in have learned not to look at what the land does to people over time, the way weather takes the paint from a barn, and nobody patches it until the boards start to give. Agnes Kowalczyk is not a real person, but the woman walking on the shoulder of a November road in Huron County with 2 bags and no hat is. She is on a farm on the 5th line or the 7th or the 10th, and her laneway is icy and her porch light is out, and she has been on the hallway floor for 40 minutes deciding whether to call. Leland is not real either, but the man sitting in the truck in the driveway for 10 minutes he is deciding whether to get out. He is deciding whether a stranger on a road in the dark is his concern or someone else's problem. He is deciding whether the obvious thing is the right thing. It usually is. If you know someone who might be that woman or that man, a neighbor who hasn't been seen, a senior on a rural road, an elder in the apartment at the end of the hall, the thing required is not large. It is a porch bulb, a drive in the dark, showing up on a Tuesday because it's Tuesday without being asked, because the obvious thing and the right thing are often exactly the same thing, and the only question is whether you get out of the truck.